Breaking news on CNN. The information is coming in at every minute, so I keep checking the wires here and checking with our international unit. The breaking news this hour, 2 major U.S. military attacks in Africa. CNN has confirmed U.S. Navy SEALs. The team went on a mission in Somalia and tried to nab an al-shabaab leader possibly linked to that Kenya mall attack that left 67 people dead that we covered so much here on CNN. The Navy SEALs had to withdraw because they were under fire, and we were told they chose to withdraw so that they would not cause more damage than needed to be in that Somali town. We do not know exactly what happened to the al-shabaab leader. Plus this one as well, the al-Qaeda operative responsible for the 1998 bombings on U.S. embassies may have been captured. Abu Anas al-Libi has topped the most wanted lists for years. We have been searching for him for years. He joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. Our Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr is here. Our senior international correspondent Nick Robertson is here as well. And Jumana Karacha joins us from the region. I want to bring in CNN's Nick Robertson first. Nick, my question to you is very simple. How big a deal is this?
It's a huge deal to get Abu Anas al-Libi. I mean, he's a big player in al-Qaeda. He is in one of al-Qaeda's sort of key target areas, if you will, the north of Africa. They've been playing on the chaos that's followed the Arab Spring, particularly in Libya. There's a growing band of Islamists there. Some of them have been sent, al-Qaeda members sent specifically from al-Qaeda heartland in Pakistan-Afghan border region to set up training camps inside Libya. They pose a threat not just in Libya, but across the north, the whole of the north of Africa, Mali, Algeria, and potentially into Europe. The reporting that we've done on this group has indicated that their plans are not just to build a network in the north of Africa, but to use that as a base to target Western interests inside Europe. How or if Abu Anas al-Libi was fitting into that spectrum of al-Qaeda's planning, we don't know specifically, but we do understand that for at least the past year, he's lived fairly openly in Tripoli, in Libya. The Libyan authorities there are not strong. They don't have a strong national security force. There are many militias, tribal-based militias across the country, as well as Islamist-based militias, which means the government's been weak there to do anything about the growth of al-Qaeda. This is a significant step that will thwart, to a degree, a small part of that growth, but it is a significant step, Don.
All right, Nick, hold on right there. I want to get to Jumana Karacha. Jumana is on the line with us, and she is in Amman, Jordan. She has covered Libya really over the years for quite a long time. And I want to talk to you, just when last we spoke, you were saying people were just getting the information, just hearing the news about this mission in this Somali town by U.S. Special Forces. What are you hearing there? What is the reaction?
Well, lots of questions coming out, Don, from Libya at this late hour. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning now in Tripoli. And the questions are, people are concerned, is there going to be any sort of backlash to this? Is there going to be any sort of retaliation against many of the Western targets that are in Tripoli, whether it's diplomatic missions, whether it's businesses? These remain as very soft targets. The Libyan government, as Nick just mentioned, is a very weak one. It is unable to provide security. So there is a lot of concern about what happens next. What sort of reaction are we going to see, if any, to this news? And of course, the questions are, people asking whether their government knew this, whether it sanctioned this, because they say there's a lot of concern that, you know, what does this mean for Libya? Is the country not sovereign anymore? Does it not, have the ability to stop foreign troops from coming into their country and nabbing people? There's also questions about, are U.S. forces going to go after Benghazi suspects next? That has been a concern. And Don, just last year, right after that attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, I remember speaking with senior Libyan government officials, and they were really, really concerned about any sort of U.S. Military action at the time following that attack in Benghazi. They said that if any U.S. military operations take place, it will undermine the government, and it could lead to more chaos. It could lead to violence. So they were really concerned about that at the time. very curious to see what will come out from the Libyan government tomorrow morning as their reaction to this, as Barbara pointed out, that they were aware at some level of this operation.
Jumana Karacha, can you hang with me just for a little bit, because I think it's very interesting what you're talking about here. You're talking about the attack on Benghazi, Libya, and now that this suspect has been gone after, and not sure if he has been captured or not, or what happened. Now that this operation has happened in Libya, I want to know what this means for the investigation into that. Jumana Karacha, stand by. Details on that right after this break. Back now to the breaking news here on CNN. Two missions carried out overseas by special forces. I want to get back to our Jumana Karacha. She's on the line joining us from Amman, Jordan. Covered Libya for years. She is gauging reaction there. And before the break, I asked you about what, if anything, what is the connection between this and the investigation into the Benghazi, Libya attack?
Well, the big issue with Dawn was that we knew that the U.S. had compiled a list of suspects who may have been involved in that attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi. We were told that the Libyan government was handed a copy of this list. They knew who these suspects were, but the Libyans had not moved, had not picked up any of those suspects. CNN actually met Ahmed Abu Khattala, one of the top suspects in the Benghazi attack, who was roaming the streets of Benghazi freely. He was able to sit with Arwa Damon at one of the hotels in Benghazi. And the question had been, why has the Libyan government not arrested them? Of course, it has always been the case that there was concerns that the government is too weak. These are all members of strong militias, some of them allied with strong Islamist militias in the area. There are tribal issues there, so it will be very difficult for this weak central government that does not have a strong security force to move in and capture these suspects. So the question had been, would the U.S. be able to do this? But of course, we would hear from the Libyan government, Libyan officials would say it would be disastrous if the U.S. Tried to nab any of these Benghazi suspects. So now that leaves the question, will this mean that the U.S. could move in, could pick up Benghazi suspects, capture or kill any of those involved in the attack if this has already happened as we saw today?
And you said there is concern from the Libyan people about that, about who exactly is allowed, if a foreign government can come into their country and carry out a mission and capture someone and then bring them back for trial.
Absolutely. It's on the street level, and you also hear it from the government. Libya's justice minister told us a few months ago that no Libyan will stand trial outside of Libya, that this had been a big thing for them, that they did not want to see any Libyans, including former regime members, standing trial outside the country. And on the street level, of course, this is a very sensitive issue. Libya is just coming out of, this devastating civil war, the revolution it went through. It is still going through a very, very rough time. Libya is a very unstable state right now. Trying to rebuild this country has been a very, very challenging task for the government. So, of course, this really undermines this weak central government that is pro-Western in Libya, and a lot of people will be asking the question now, what kind of government do they have? How sovereign is Libya really if foreign troops are able to pick up Libyan citizens and take them out of the country? So a lot of concern about what kind of reaction we'll be seeing to that, Don.
Jumana Karacha, thank you. Stand by, everyone.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everyone. It is the top of the hour. I'm Don Lemon. You're in the CNN newsroom. Breaking news here on CNN this hour. Two major U.S. military attacks in Africa. CNN has confirmed a U.S. Navy SEALs team went on a mission in Somalia and tried to nab an al-shabaab leader possibly linked to that Kenya mall attack that left 67 people dead. The Navy SEALs had to withdraw before they could confirm he was killed because they were under fire. Also, a U.S. official says he does not believe any SEALs were killed in that mission. We do not know exactly what happened to the al-Shabaab leader as well. Al-Shabaab works as al-Qaeda's proxy in Kenya. There was also action in Tripoli, Libya, to tell you about. U.S. Special Forces captured an al-Qaeda operative wanted for the 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Abu Anas al-Libi has topped the most wanted list for years. The U.S. had a $5 million bounty on his head. U.S. officials have wanted al-Libi to face trial in an American court. He joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. Straight first to our Barbara Starr, our Pentagon correspondent. She is working her sources now at the Pentagon and has the very latest on these two major operations here, two very different parts of Africa. Let's talk about what happened in Somalia first. So when did this commando raid take place? And tell us who the SEALs intended to kill or capture, Barbara.
Good evening, Don. This occurred in the last 24 hours, a U.S. Navy SEAL team moving into an al-shabaab stronghold town in south-central Somalia. They were going after someone they believed to be a major figure in the al-shabaab network. This is the al-Qaeda affiliate organization in Somalia that recently spread its tentacles into Kenya in that shopping mall attack. Growing concern that the al-Shabaab group had rising strength and a rising ability to project its power outside of Somalia into Kenya against Western interests. So that was what they were going after. By all accounts, the SEALs ran into intense opposition when they got to this town. A firefight ensued, and the SEALs, we are told, made the decision to withdraw rather than engage in further combat. So they left before they could determine whether or not they were able to kill the man they were going after. No SEALs, as far as we know, injured in the attack. Not clear yet the level of damage in the town, the number of Somalis or al-Shabaab fighters in the town that were killed or wounded in the assault. So a very fuzzy picture, but a clear indication, in fact, that there was a good deal of hostile action on the ground when they engaged in this firefight. Don?
Barbara Starr with the information. Barbara, you have been working your sources there. The information, the situation that happened in Libya came in earlier today, and now we're getting bits and pieces about the actual confirmation that al-Libi has been captured. And then also now this latest one that happened in Somalia. Details are coming in about that, and we expect more moment by moment.
We do. We expect more details in the coming hours and perhaps over the next couple of days. The move to get Anus al-Libi, the major al-Qaeda figure in Libya to the north, a man with a $5 million U.S. reward and indictment on his head for his role in the 1998 bombings of the U.S. embassies in Africa. This is somebody the U.S. wanted to get very badly. And it was U.S. Special Operations Forces, we are told, that went after him inside Libya. But, Don, what is the common thread that we are seeing tonight? The face of U.S. Special Operations going into these very dangerous areas, going after very specific targets in counterterrorism, anti-terrorism operations, targets that they feel that the U.S. feels pose a threat to the United States, that these are the areas of the world where there are not strong governments that can control law enforcement operations, that can control terrorist operations in their own territories. These are what they call the ungoverned spaces to some significant extent. Ungoverned, and that means this is where al-Qaeda is thriving these days. These are the areas the U.S. goes after very covertly, only talking about it when they want to. Clearly, they wanted the world to know about both of these operations because of the threats that were posed. But this goes on quite frequently, and this really is the new face of al-Qaeda. These affiliate organizations in so many countries that U.S. Special Operations are targeting. Don?
All right, Barbara Starr, don't go anywhere because I want to get to our Nick Robertson now. He's our senior international correspondent. Nick Robertson is in London. Nick, you have been speaking with your sources about the operation that happened, about al-Libi. What are they telling you?
Well, they're seeing this as a significant crossroads. Quite where it leads, they say it's unclear. A significant crossroads because it means that this is a direct intervention into Libya to pick up this senior al-Qaeda figure. Unknown consequences because, as Jumana has been reporting as well, one of the concerns in Libya is that any U.S. action to capture people involved in the Benghazi attack at that time a year ago could have led to a potential backlash. So the question right now is, will this arrest, capture of Abu Anas al-Libi, will that lead to a rise in attacks on U.S. interests in Libya at the moment? And that's a very real concern that I'm hearing from people who spend a lot of time in Libya, who are in contact with government agencies that would have an interest in securing U.S. premises, other foreign national premises inside Libya. So that is the concern at the moment. How does this play out with the Islamists who are strong inside Libya? Will the Libyan government be able to keep them at bay, stop the potential for attacks, or will we see a follow-on and a fallout from this arrest on?
So this was 1998 that al-Libi is believed to be responsible for the attacks on U.S. consulates, U.S. embassies in East Africa. 1998. This is 15 years later. So what does this say about what's happening now when you know, as it concerns Benghazi and the attacks on the consulate there? This was 15 years ago, and they're just now getting to this. My question is, maybe is the criticism premature when people say, you know what, we haven't gotten anyone, the investigation is not playing out as planned?
Certainly, the investigation is taking a long time in some people's eyes to capture the people responsible. But Libya is not the sort of country that you can walk into, that you have a national security force who are able to go where they want to, when they want to, and arrest people that you would want to go and talk to. It's not that kind of environment. Al-Qaeda has set up camps in the east of the country and other parts of the country. This is a resurgent Al-Qaeda that's tying links between members across the whole of the north of Africa, from the Sinai in Egypt, through Egypt, to Libya, to neighboring Tunisia, to Mali, to the south, to Algeria as well. So this is an organization that has grown strong on the back of the Arab Spring. So the move now is, we don't know why it's happened now specifically. If we did, we'd be able to gain a lot more insight into perhaps why, not just why this has happened, but understand better the context of why it's happening. But certainly Al-Qaeda in the north of Africa is a growing threat and danger. And to go in now into Libya certainly does show, with the knowledge of the Libyan government, does show some compliance there. But again, we don't know what the outfall for this weak Libyan government is going to be, Don.
All right. Our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson, is in London following this. Barbara Starr is following this from the Pentagon as well. Both of you, please stand by. I want to get now to our foreign affairs reporter, Elise Labott. She's joining us by phone. Elise, talk to us. Listen, let's talk about how sensitive these embassy attacks are. I mean, even years later, 1998, what is any reaction to this? And you know the State Department well. You cover the State Department for years as well. Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, Don, 15 years after the attack, I mean, obviously there will be, you know, kind of cheers and a celebration that the mastermind of the attack will be brought to justice, hopefully. But I think 15 years later, you look, that was really a watershed in terms of, you know, kind of terrorist attacks against U.S. embassies abroad, really caused a major investigation, a re-examination of U.S. facilities overseas. There have been so many commissions and reports and rebuilding of embassies around the world. And you see, as Nick has been saying, you know, 15 years later, these embassies and consulates are still fragile. On the 15-year anniversary of the attack in August, that came in a week of heightened security concerns at U.S. embassies in the Arab world and in Africa. About 20 posts were closed because of threats, possible threats, because of al-Qaeda. And you saw with the attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi last year that even everything that's been done over these years to strengthen the security at U.S. posts, as these terrorists become more sophisticated, as they look for softer targets, as they look for ways to breach these compounds, it's still a fragile situation. And now if you have this attack on the deadly mall in Kenya, now U.S. Marines are fortifying security at the American Embassy in Nairobi. So the quicker that they try to fortify these posts, even as they're doing it, it's still becoming more dangerous, and the threats are coming fast and furious. So even as there'll be a celebration that al-Libi was nabbed and hopefully will brought to justice, the State Department security officials know that this could even cause greater threats to U.S. facilities overseas.
Beyond that, can you talk to us more about what's happening now at the State Department? Because remember, the State Department came under a lot of criticism after the Benghazi attack, Secretary Clinton specifically, and now Secretary Kerry. I would imagine watching this situation very closely.
Watching it very closely, but also thinking about how they're going to prevent another one. I mean, obviously, there has been a lot of talk about why the people, for instance, that were responsible for Benghazi, when they know that they're roaming free in Libya, haven't been able to be arrested. But we know, as Nick and Germana and others have been saying, that Libya has kind of slid steadily into lawlessness with no central government, and the U.S. is really loath to kind of push the Libyans in terms of, apprehending and questioning these suspects. But what they're trying to do right now, Don, is make sure that something like this never happens again. And so there's a couple of dozen high-risk posts around the world now. U.S. Marines are going to be sent there. They're going to be sent extra specially trained security officials. They're in the State Department hiring more top-level officials to look at security. There have been so many commissions and reports, trying to make sure that something like this never happens again. So while the FBI and law enforcement is working on the kind of justice angle of the perpetrators, at the State Department, they really want to make sure that U.S. embassies and consulates around the world are as safe as they can be, and that another Benghazi will never happen again.
Elise Labott, thank you. Stand by as well. We're going to get back to Elise Labott. If you're just now tuning in to CNN, you're wondering what the fuss is all about, what the breaking news is. There have been two major operations carried out by U.S. Special Forces overseas, and it means a heck of a lot to our fight against terrorism. More details after this break. Welcome back to CNN, everyone. Breaking news this hour. We are following two U.S. military attacks in Africa to tell you about. U.S. Special Forces, that's what CNN has learned. Special Forces captured an al-Qaeda operative wanted for the 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Abu Anas al-Libi has topped the most wanted list for years. He was captured in Libya's capital of Tripoli. A U.S. official says the operation was conducted with the knowledge of the Libyan government. The U.S. had a $5 million bounty on his head, and al-Libi joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. Also to tell you about in Somalia, we're learning a U.S. Navy SEAL team went on a mission there in Somalia, and they are trying to nab an an al-shabaab leader, possibly linked to that Kenya mall attack that left 67 people dead. The Navy SEALs had to withdraw before they could confirm he was killed because they were under fire. U.S. official says he does not believe any SEALs were killed. We do not exactly know what happened to the al-Shabaab leader. Al-Shabaab works as al-Qaeda's proxy in Kenya. That's important to point out. So that said, that's why I want to get to CNN's national security analyst, Peter Bergen. He joins me now from Washington. Al-Shabaab works as a proxy to al-Qaeda in that region. Tell us about that.
Well, even more than a proxy, Don. I mean, al-Shabaab is really a wholly owned subsidiary of al-Qaeda. They've had a relationship with al-Qaeda going back several years, but in last year they formally announced the merger of the two groups. So to call it an affiliate is probably to underestimate the relationship that exists between them. And we saw with the attack on the mall in Kenya that this is a group that has adopted al-Qaeda's ideology wholesale. The reason they attacked the mall was not only because it was Kenyan, but also because it attracted a fair number of Western, businessmen and others living in Nairobi.
So if you attack one, are you weak? If you weaken one, Peter, do you weaken the other? If you carry out some major operation on al-shabaab and it's successful, does that affect al-Qaeda and vice versa?
You know, I mean, to some degree, maybe. You know, clearly, al-shabaab is a group that has adopted the al-Qaeda ideology, is willing to attack targets outside Somalia, including targets where Westerners are congregating, and, you know, undermining it would be useful. But, you know, these groups also have affiliates in many other countries in Africa, and as we've seen, an al-Qaeda leader was also captured within the last 24 hours in another African country, which is Libya. So, you know, it's part of a campaign where, you know, if you capture or kill one person, it hardly means that these groups are out of business. On the other hand, it's not just whack-a-mole. If you capture or kill dozens of leaders of an organization, it tends to really grind it down, and that's what's happened with al-Qaeda Central in Pakistan, where even Osama bin Laden was keenly aware that the drone program had decimated his top leadership.
Okay. Peter, stand by. I'm being told now that we have CNN military analyst Lieutenant Rick Fancona on the line now from Eugene, Oregon. Lieutenant Colonel, what are you hearing about the 2 U.S. Special Forces operations in Libya and Somalia?
Well, the one in Somalia was tailor-made for the SEALs. Doesn't surprise me at all that they would go in there. If you look at this town, Barawa, it's about 100 miles south of Mogadishu. It's right on the coast. It allows the Navy access, to it from the ocean. That's what they do. It works very well. In Tripoli, it's a different situation. You're operating inside the capital city. That would have probably required the support and acknowledgement of the Libyan government. Although it's weak, you still need to be able to operate in the city safely. So these look like maybe not exactly coordinated operations, but they were going after high-value targets. One could have gone without the other, but the fact that they did them both, I think, is a real signal that the United States, no matter how long it takes, will go after these targets.
Colonel, you heard our foreign affairs correspondent say this, Elise Labott. You heard our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson, say it as well. The concern now would be about possible violent reactions in Libya as well as Somalia.
Yeah, I think that's concerning in both places. al-shabaab will not, just take this. They will try to mount some sort of retaliation. Now, what capability do they have to retaliate against the Navy SEALs? That might not be so great. But they could launch another attack inside Kenya, aimed at the West, aimed at the Kenyan government, which is supporting the United States. The United States and Kenya have a very close working relationship, so they may go after these soft targets, as Peter mentioned, rather than going after things that they know they can't successfully attack anymore. We've hardened some of the embassies. We've semi-secured civil aviation, but malls are the new airplanes. They may go after something like that. In Libya, Abu Anas al-Libi, by his name, you know that he was a Libyan national. So there may be reprisals aimed at American facilities there. And, as I think it was Germana said, that the Libyan government is very, very weak. They will be very, very strained to prevent attacks on these facilities. We're going to have to secure those facilities ourselves. So, yeah, this is the beginning of the operation, not the end.
So if I'm sitting at home watching Lieutenant Colonel Francona and Don Lemon on television, I'm wondering what this means to, Mrs. Lemon at home, or Mrs. Francona, or Mr. Johnson in Iowa. What does this mean to the average American?
It means that we may have embarked on another set of operations. We may be in for some bad news in the next few days. We may be in for some good news as American forces continue to take down some of these targets. But what it demonstrates to the country is that we are not lying down and being overrun by terrorists. We are fighting back, and I think that's a good signal to send, not only to the bad guys, but I think it's important that the people at home realize that we are standing up for ourselves.
An interesting signal to send when back home our government is shut down. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Francona. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more with someone here. He's from the New Yorker magazine. He knows all about this stuff. As a matter of fact, he is a senior editor of the website there, joining us right after the break. Don't go anywhere. Breaking news this hour, 2 major U.S. military attacks in Africa. U.S. Special Forces captured an al-Qaeda operative wanted for the 1998 bombings on the U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Abu Anas al-Libi has topped the most wanted list for quite some time now. He was captured in Libya's capital of Tripoli. U.S. officials says the operation was conducted with the knowledge of the Libyan government. The U.S. had a $5 million bounty on his head. That's new information. Captured with the knowledge of the Libyan government. Al-Libi joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of the terror group. Now we go to Somalia. U.S. Navy SEALs team went on a mission to nab an al-Qaeda and al-shabaab, leader possibly linked to that Kenya mall attack that left 67 people dead. The Navy SEALs had to withdraw before they could confirm he was killed because they were under fire. A U.S. official says he does not believe any SEALs were killed. We do not exactly know what happened to that al-Shabaab leader. To the Pentagon now, and CNN's Barbara Starr with some new information. Barbara, what do you have?
Well, Don, an extraordinary development late tonight. The Pentagon has just issued an official confirmation about an operation in Somalia. I don't remember them talking about anything like this quite so publicly. Issuing this statement, and I want to say it is from the Pentagon Press Secretary George Little, saying, quote, I can confirm that yesterday, October 4th, U.S. military personnel were involved in a counterterrorism operation against a known al-Shabaab terrorist. We are not prepared to provide additional detail at this time. But separately from this, a U.S. official also commenting and saying that indeed the U.S. personnel, we now know those were U.S. Navy SEALs in that town in Somalia, quote, took all necessary precautions to avoid civilian casualties in this operation and disengaged after inflicting some al-Shabaab casualties. They are not able to identify who those al-Shabaab members were that they got, but this is the first official confirmation from a U.S. official that the U.S. forces, we know them to be Navy SEALs, disengaged. They left the town. They came under heavy fire. There was concern about civilian casualties, and so the SEALs essentially packed up and left. We don't have any details about the level of the casualties they inflicted and what exactly happened in that town in Somalia. It is known to be a significant al-Shabaab stronghold. And I have to say that in many places where al-Shabaab operates in Somalia, they enact significant intimidation and fear amongst the Somali people who live there. Often they are poor farmers, rural people who are severely intimidated by the al-Shabaab. So we don't know exactly at this hour what transpired in that town. We know the Navy SEALs went in, inflicted some casualties, came under fire, and got out of there. Don?
Barbara Starr, thank you very much. I want to introduce you to someone. This is Nicholas Thompson. He is an editor at the NewYorker.com and a fellow at the New America Foundation. You're also a contributor to CNN International, correct? You have some points that you want to make here. You said it's interesting to you that this is all happening at a time of a government shutdown, D.C. incompetence at a time of Special Forces action.
I mean, it's sort of amazing that there's this incredible risky operations, 2 very risky simultaneous operations coordinated clearly at high levels of government happening at the same time that the government is shut down. Now, of course, the Navy SEALs are essential employees. Of course, they're working. It is ironic, however, when you juxtapose the 2 things that are happening in Africa and in Washington.
Both operations were raids and not drone strikes. Drone strikes have come under criticism a lot here in the United States in this administration.
I mean, this is very interesting. We don't know exactly why they carried out these raids instead of shooting them with drones. One possibility, of course, is that you want to capture these people for extra intelligence. There also can be fewer risks of civilian casualties if you actually go in there instead of shooting from above. And also, of course, there has been a lot of criticism of the drone program. Unclear if that played any role in the decision not to do these as drone strikes, but instead to do them as raids.
Should we draw any conclusion or anything from these 2, the way these 2 operations went down, 2 bad guys captured thousands of miles apart at the same time?
Well, what we don't know is we don't know whether the close coordination, why that happened, right? It could be that the same intelligence mechanism that let us know where al-Libi was is what let us know where the al-Shabaab leader was. So it's possible that we thought that the terrorists would know that once one of them had been caught, the other would go underground. It's possible that it was done for other strategic benefits. We will, learn that eventually.
As we learned from the attack on the mall in Kenya, they have been heavily recruited extensively here. Al-Shabaab, I'm talking about. How risky is this attack on Al-Shabaab? Because they've recruited extensively in the U.S. How might this cause problems?
Well, so the worst case scenario for this, this is a very risky operation. It happens almost 20 years to the day after the Black Hawk Down operation in Mogadishu. And it happens on a group that is essentially a regional terrorist organization. Al-Shabaab mostly operates in that part of Africa. But al-Shabaab also recruits heavily from the United States. Now, if al-Shabaab turns into an international terrorist organization, that's not a good thing. We'll see. This could be a death blow to an organization that has been on its heels a little bit before that attack in Kenya, or this could be something that inspires al-Shabaab and makes it into a worse problem.
And as usual, if you go on social media, people are making the really partisan people, right? The people who are in the weeds on both sides are making some sort of political statement about this. Is there a political statement to be made about this? Might someone make hay and say, hey, listen, this is proof that this, or the president is doing his job in this respect? Is there anything political to be made out of this yet?
Well, there are, people will make political statements. One, this shows Obama. He's really good at getting the bad guys. He got Osama bin Laden, and, when we learned what really happened in Somalia, this may rebound to his credit, or perhaps not if it turned out not to go as well as we thought. But certainly the operation in Tripoli was very successful. So some people will say this shows Obama at his best, pushing back al-Qaeda, getting all of the top leadership. He's done it from the beginning. He'll keep doing it. Some people will probably say, hey, this was done to distract us from the mess in Washington and all the criticism coming to Obama after healthcare. That, I think, is, it's baloney. If you want to distract the country, you wouldn't do it you wouldn't announce it and have it come out late on a Saturday night. So I don't think there will be a lot of traction for that argument. Ultimately, I don't think this is a partisan operation. This is an American operation. Both sides, everybody in this country should hope for these operations to succeed, for them to be carried out, and for there to be as minimal blowback against this nation as possible. I hope this is an opportunity for people to come together.
Yeah, everybody, take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Not everything is partisan, especially when it comes to defending ourselves against terrorism.
Right. I think that's right. This is an operation that Republicans and Democrats should want to be carried out as effectively as possible and to have the most success as possible.
How might one report on this in something as a New Yorker? Is this a longer story that would take me between now and my time to flying to Africa to finish because your articles are so darn long?
Well, I hope what the New Yorker will do is that on the website we'll have smart reactions to it, immediate takes, that's what we do. But also that one of our great reporters like Dexter Filkins or John Lee Anderson will try to, over the course of the next few months, do a long story that will take you your entire flight to your next trip to Africa. Yes, that is our
That was a nice
ambition.
little plug, but we're hoping that you contribute something to CNN.com as well, since you are a contributor here at CNN International. We really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Great information.
Thank you.
Enjoy that. All right. Continuing to following the breaking news here on CNN. We're going to do that throughout the hour, but first we want to tell you there's some other developing news happening. We're talking about Tropical Storm. It's Karen. It's spinning in the middle of the Gulf. Breaking news this hour here on CNN. The U.S. launched 2 major military operations today on al-Qaeda-linked terror leaders in Africa. One mission resulted in the capture of a terrorist the U.S. has wanted for 15 years for the 1998 bombings of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Abu Anas al-Libi was captured in Libya's capital, Tripoli. The U.S. had a $5 million bounty on his head. A U.S. official says the operation was conducted with the knowledge of the Libyan government. Al-Libi joined al-Qaeda soon after its founding and is considered a senior member of al-Qaeda. In Somalia, a U.S. Navy SEALs team went on a mission to nab an al-Qaeda and al-shabaab leader, possibly linked to that Kenya mall attack that left 67 people dead. The Navy SEALs had to withdraw before they could confirm he was killed because they were under fire. A U.S. official says he does not believe any SEALs were killed. We do not know exactly what happened to the al-Shabaab leader. Al-Shabaab works as a proxy to al-Qaeda in Kenya. CNN's Barbara Starr working her sources from the Pentagon. Barbara, 2 major operations here, 2 very different parts of Africa. Why don't we start with Libya first?
Well, Don, as you say, this al-Qaeda operative seized by U.S. Special Operations Forces, now in U.S. custody. My colleague, Evan Perez, our justice reporter here at CNN, continuing to follow this story through the night. I think it is fair to say we should expect to see al-Libi show up back in the United States for federal prosecution. He is under indictment for alleged terrorism activities. In Somalia, you saw U.S. Navy SEALs confirmed went into a town in south central Somalia to try and capture an al-shabaab leader, got into a heavy firefight. No SEALs wounded or killed, thankfully, in that fight, but the SEALs did withdraw from the town under heavy fire out of concern, we are told, over civilian casualties. What we have seen here tonight unfold, Don, truly, is the real face, if you will, of covert U.S. Special Operations, commando operations, when they go into these places under cover of darkness often and stage these operations to go after key terrorism targets. We will find out more, I'm sure, in the coming hours and days about how both these operations went down, but I don't think the irony escapes too many people in the U.S. military. While the politicians are engaging in discussions on furloughs and 400,000 civilian employees forced into furlough, U.S. Special Operations Command successfully, by all accounts, conducted these two operations. Don?
And Barbara, that is why it's so important that our men and women in uniform get their paychecks, that they're taken care of. And it's important that we get the government back up and running to make sure all Americans are taken care of on a night like this. Barbara Starr, great reporting tonight. Thank you so much for guiding us through this here on CNN this evening. I'm Don Lemon in New York. Thank you so much for joining us. Continue to watch us for updates. We'll bring them to you as we get them. Anthony Bourdain, Parts Unknown begins right now.